I won't spread.
Alright, and I'm not going to man spread today, guys. Today, we got ThiccBoi back on the couch. And it's probably going to be a meaty discussion. We've been playing a lot of Returnal.
We got lots to talk about.
You have finished it. I think I've played more than you, but I am yet to finish it.
I don't know why that
so
is.
maybe I'm not as good at... Anyway, let's get into this. Do the drop. Let's talk about it after the drop. Or if you said that, let's do it again.
Drop.
Okay, so what do you think?
Okay,
High-level thoughts.
Returnal. Returnal's the big, first-party game that's just released from Sony, developed by House Marquee, depending on how you pronounce it.
Yep.
Known for their sort of bullet hell kind of games. I think Resogun, Super Stardust, Delta. This marks quite a big and ambitious jump forward for them as a studio. So Returnal, what is it? It is essentially a third-person bullet hell roguelike. Or it's a roguelite.
Yep.
Lite. Where you essentially traverse areas and, get items and play through a looping gameplay, death after death, in the hopes of, progressing further and further, getting a few unlocks that help you along the way, and ultimately getting to the end.
Yeah, ultimately, from a story point of view, how that all folds in, you wake up every time, you're trying to figure out why you keep looping every time you die, and that's why you're all on this alien planet and you're trying to figure out what you're doing. Now, the first question is, was it fun? Did you actually enjoy this game? Like,
Yes.
I went in knowing that a lot of people were saying great things. I was like, okay, this is going to be a pretty high caliber game. That's what I was expecting. I am enjoying it. I actually think it's very frustrating. I've gotten angry. See, the thing was Dark Souls, right? I finished Dark Souls New Game Plus. I finished Bloodborne. I got to the last game of the boss of Sekiro. I can do hard games. But this one is really giving me a lot of trouble. And when you told me you finished it, and then you said after the point that I'm up to, you were able to finish it in 3 hours. So I feel like I'm close to maybe finishing that, but yes.
Yeah, so that's an interesting point. In terms of how long this game is going to last for you, it definitely hinges on your competency of mastering the game's sort of systems.
Oh, really?
Yes. So I hit the credits at 13 hours.
I'm at least 20 hours in.
Sam's at around
At
20.
least.
Sam's at around 20.
It says 24, but I think there's a bit of time I've left it on.
Yeah. The game's funny. It really front loads its difficulty in the first 3 rooms, or, floors, let's call them. It took me 10 hours.
Biomes.
Took me biomes, yeah, sure, there's 6 in total. Took me 10 hours to get past the 3rd area, and then 3 hours to finish it. So it really, it's an odd one. I expected myself to go, all the previews were saying anywhere from 10 to 30 hours. I'm more on that 10 side.
Let's talk about combat and enemy design. I feel like one thing that really struck me is, especially in the second area, and kind of the first also, but like as you go on, there's not a lot of enemy design. I feel like the third area has been the most enemy design that I've seen, but it really revolves around 2 or 3 types of enemies in that area, and they just kind of come at you in different types of combinations.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of, in terms of replayability, in terms of being excited to verse particular enemies. That's the first thing that jumped out, that each particular biome doesn't throw you a lot of types of enemies. It's just more of the same in different combinations.
Yeah, so look, I think there is a dearth of enemy variety, but fortunately the encounters with the few enemies that there are really engaging. Their movesets are beautifully animated, when you've got these projectiles coming in all these different patterns and looking as amazing and vibrant as they do. And I don't know, it's weird. I couldn't believe how well they managed to convey depth perception in the game. Like when you've got all these projectiles coming towards you rather, at all these different distances, your eye just kind of is able to pick it up, and you kind of bob and weave. They've done an amazing job.
It's kind of Guitar Hero-esque.
Yeah, it's like you just sort of just switch off and you're just looking at it.
Yeah,
I kind of switch off and make sure I'm aiming at the enemy, and I'm just dodging almost automatically. Not to say it's easy, but it's very intuitive. They've done a good job.
I would say that it's very therapeutic in some moments in terms of that enemy design and that combat sequences. Sometimes you're just kind of vibing and you're really twitching off and just jumping and strafing left and right. One thing I will say is this game, more than others that I can think of really reward you from just staying away. Like, yes, you have a melee, but like 9 times out of 10, the name of the game is reading the environment and in terms of reading the enemy's kind of attacks that are coming at you. And the further away you are, the more time you have to just like get away from it or not even have to worry about it, because it sometimes has this kind of directing towards the floor. So some of them never get to you. But look, you know, they also give you a shotgun if we're talking about weapons in terms of enemy design. Did you ever use the actual shotgun? It felt like, because the enemies were designed in such a way that you always wanted to be away,
well,
I never used it.
I don't want to get too stuck on one weapon particularly, but I will say...
But the weapons in general...
But I will say, there's about 2 weapons I liked using. And there's quite a few weapons in the game. I feel like I was either not using them correctly, or there are just some absolute standouts and some absolute stinkers.
Yeah.
I basically wanted anything that was automatic and had good range. I feel like the enemy's attacks and movesets really can only be best countered, at least competently or simply, by just keeping it range and picking them off. So where I was kind of let down in one respect was the viability of all these different weapons. You keep picking up more and more as you progress, but you end up just wanting to use what you've already got. Unfortunately.
There's a lot of times if we move with weapons into level design, the level design, the auto-generated nature of it, you are completely at the mercy of sometimes picking up the weapon that you want, but it's level 0. And then, like, there's a level 9 pistol, and I'm like, oh, I don't want that, or a rocket launcher, for instance. And then the entire kind of run that you may be going on, you know, it just feels like it's really determined by how much luck you've had with the certain types of weapons that you want to use.
Ultimately, there's 6 areas in the game. Now, traditionally, in this genre of a roguelite, you'll clear the first area, and then you go to the second area. Then you clear the second area, and you go to the third area.
Yep.
The runs in this game, and you'll hear a lot of people online saying it, are really, really long. So in order to, like, runs upwards of 1.5 to 2 hours. I play a lot of roguelikes. I played Hades. I basically live on the Binding of Isaac.
I've played a hell of a lot of Dead Cells. You love Binding of Isaac. I love a lot more Dead Cells. I played a lot of Dead Cells. I got to the final difficulty. Yeah. I spent a lot of time. So in terms of roguelike or lights, I do enjoy them.
You've got normally about anywhere from 25 to 40 minutes. These are anywhere from 1.5 to 2 hours. So what they've done is you start in the first area, and then once you've cleared the second, you never really have to go back to the second. You can just skip straight to the third. And so where you'd normally go from floor to floor and clear the areas, get stronger progressively, you can kind of just warp to the third area. You pick up one consumable, or you pick up one item, instantly levels up your weapon proficiency, which determines the level of guns that you're going to find. So it sort of disincentivizes you from going through all the areas and, you know, clearing out enemies, getting stronger, getting items, and then moving on, when you can just skip to the third part, or the third area, and just be at that same playing field.
But I think it's an interesting thing what you've said about the weapon proficiency. There's so much, you know, randomly generated area that you'd expect that you'd want to go and explore. Like, you know, in Dead Cells, for instance, you know, you're able to use certain vines to go to new areas and not have to necessarily go through the standard path that you'd go through. But there was an incentivization, I guess, with Dead Cells, that you wanted to clear rooms, you wanted to kill those enemies because you might get some really cool things along the way. But the moment you're going into these new areas that are also randomly generated, you've gotten all your weapon proficiencies up to a certain level, that all this, you know, randomly generated level design isn't really as exciting now to look through, because it's kind of brought you up to a level that you don't need to do any of that. And I think that in itself kind of makes the auto-generated aspect to the areas you've already kind of done a moot point. Like, you don't really need to go back, you know.
You actually can't go back.
Well, I mean, like the first area, for instance, you know, I just tried to get to the next third area, for instance, as fast as I possibly could, because I knew, you know, and we'll get to the actual loot game itself in a bit, but before we get there, I knew the name of the game was actually health. Like, for me, I was always like, I'm going to go through as many rooms in this level design as possible to pick up as many health as possible, then just move to the next area, because the weapon proficiency was going to take care of any kind of progression I may have needed to do in those initial first areas.
I think you make an interesting point about health. To me, in Returnal, health is pretty much the only important upgrade that you can get in the game.
Which is a real disappointment, I think.
Maybe I'm not gaming the system enough, but I feel like the only useful consumables, except a very, very small number, are health pickups, and the only effective or empowering power-ups is health ups. A lot of the game is just about survivability. You never really feel powerful. You just feel like you got a lot of health. And I think ultimately where this falls over as a roguelike is in that kind of player power fantasy. You know, not to draw too many comparisons, but to too many other games. But I play a shitload of Binding of Isaac. I got 300 hours and it keeps ticking up. The feeling that you get when you clear floors, walk into an item room, that hit of dopamine when you see what's on the pedestal, you pick it up and you're like, I'm strong now. My shots now do this. Or even if it is a health up, it's like there's so many other items that when you get the health up, you're like, that's fine because health up's a health up. But when you get all these other items that really affect the gameplay, change how you interact with the environments, change your shots, change your shot speed, or do these sort of modifications to your player power, you feel strong. But I feel like in Returnal, I never really felt strong. I just felt like I could survive. And I find like the loot game and the item economy in Returnal it needs some tweaks. It feels like a first attempt.
I feel like the crux of a lot of these rogue likes or lights that create an addiction to it is definitely the power fantasy. And the bottom line is, every single time I played, 9 times out of 10, apart from like the vampire leech kind of artifacts or parasites, you were disappointed because you were like, this just feels like it's just downplaying the potential abilities and parasites and artifacts and attributes I could have in this amazing world that they've made. Sometimes it would like reduce, my alt fire, by 3 seconds, so I could use it 3 seconds faster. Like that stuff.
And it's already on like a 25-second or 30-second cooldown.
It's so small.
Yeah.
There's many runs I would go through that I didn't even look at my artifacts or parasites because I didn't even think that they were going to be consequential, and they weren't. The only times I ever felt like I was having a good run was when I had a decent weapon, which was level 9 or 10 or whatever, and on top of that had a lot of health and health packs. At no point did I ever feel like the artifacts ever paid off, especially when you look and you also knew that not only were they giving you a pretty weak bonus, they're also taking something away from you. And that in itself never made you excited about having a good run.
So a lot of the items in Returnal will give you basically a stat up and a stat down. You need to make that.
Artifacts don't do that though.
Yeah, sure, but there's these items called parasites. They'll give you a stat up and a stat down. There'll be chests that you can open up and with a chance for a stat down. So a lot of it's like
that's a good point.
A lot of it's like this risk and reward kind of, I want it, but can I afford to take it? I just towards the end was never taking any of those. They're called malignant. I wasn't taking any of the malignant chests because I don't want a stat down. I wasn't taking any of the malignant currency. I don't want stat downs. I don't feel like the risk versus reward was balanced enough where I could sort of min-max it and get a lot of something and have a very small amount of another thing and still feel like I'm on top.
Yeah.
I always felt like if I was min-maxing, I'm still here, but I'm way down here.
I feel like the more you understood the systems, the more you actually did not want to interact with those systems. I really felt like the more I understood that certain parasites and certain artifacts did next to nothing for me or did not give me a sizable change in my gameplay, the more I just did not want to interact with that risk and reward. And I felt like, the basic problem that I know we're saying a lot of negative things, like I still had a good time, but, the crux of a lot of good rogues, from what I've seen, is like there's this synergistic nature about it that really makes it all come to life.
Yeah, items combine and
all that, right? Like, this just didn't have any synergy that really made a lot of the runs feel like, wow, I hope I get that run again. It was always, wow, I hope I get that much health again. Do you know what I mean? Like, it felt like that.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree. But, I mean, look, I loved the game. I feel like we're talking a lot of negatives, but I suppose, it's good to kind of bring up the things you don't like.
I think it's because we both like rogues. Like we both.
I love the genre.
Yeah.
Mate, I play Isaac every single night before I go to bed.
You go to bed to watch that YouTuber.
Yeah, I watch Northern Lion. I don't know if we could...
Yeah, of course.
I watch Northern Lion, and I'm like literally daily. Some people go to church on Sunday. I watch Isaac every night and play it. This is I love it.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's why I'm nitpicking its roguelite elements maybe a bit too much. What is it otherwise? I loved the experience. The combat was fluid. The enemy animations and environmental design. It was one of the most beautiful games I've played ever. It might not be up there with the greats, but the number of particle effects, it looks like New Year's Eve. I've never seen a game with more particle effects running at smooth 60. I had no issues. You had a few frame rate drops.
Couple of drops.
But it's running...
My game crashed also, and I lost all my progress.
Oh, that happened to you. See, a lot of people are talking about the crashes. Yeah. I never got a crash, fortunately. I can imagine, given that it's a 2 hour, 1.5 to 2 hour runtime per run, that would be heartbreaking. But I was fortunate enough to have it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like the first AAA main entry we've seen in terms of the rogue-like. That's not just delivering it in kind of like a pixel 8-bit format. I feel like that was really built from the indie space, and that's now permeating into the AAA area, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
And I think that if this is their first attempt of like bringing more of an audience into that space, I think it's great. Now I know Hades is like it was up for Game of the Year and stuff. Like I'm not saying that roguelikes are like this small little thing that no one knows about. I know they do, but in terms of having graphical fidelity this crisp in the rogue space, it seems like it's a pretty new thing, and I think it's one of the best games I've ever seen in my entire life. But what about difficulty curve? Difficulty curve, man. Because look, just quickly, I like difficulty when I'm playing Dark Souls, right? I love New Game Plus 7. I just feel like when I take that boss down, I'm like, holy shit, I did that. I felt like there was less payoffs for this, and it has it's not kept me as engaged as much as Souls does. And I think that comes back to the basic idea that the systems aren't that rewarding like they are in Souls when you start understanding things.
Obviously the game's trying to do its own thing. There's a lot of discussion online about the difficulty of this game. I think it's an important discussion because some people don't like hard games. Some people play games to cultivate a farm. Some people play games to feel like a rock star. People like different things. Yeah. No doubt about it, this game's pretty tough. It certainly spikes in the third area and then tapers off. As I said earlier, it took me 10 hours to finish the first three areas, and then took me 3 hours to finish the last 3 areas. I didn't die since that 10-hour mark. Yeah. So I literally finished the boss that I was struggling on for a bit, didn't die all the way to credits.
But that's important to mention that you actually got the one perk that's actually makes you feel powerful, and that was leech on your weapon.
Yeah, I had leech, so that basically every shot I did had a chance to restore some.
There's
health.
2 types of leech. There's the one that you just once you have adrenaline, or when you actually just shoot your weapon.
Well, yeah,
it sounds like you had the good one.
Yeah, they're both good. That's the thing. So, not to get back on the items, but there's such a small number of good items
stuff,
that I had a good item. I'm like, all right, let's do it.
But back to
the difficulty in this game is you're gonna feel it. It can be very frustrating at times. Look, there were certainly moments where I wanted to put the game down, but we also wanted to do this video. So I kind of just banged my hand against the wall in that third section and got a good run and did it, and then here we are.
Yep.
I certainly wanted to put the game down at times. I don't think the difficulty is tuned quite where it needs to be, but
especially how long the runs are.
Yeah,
the runs are if it was that difficult and the run was 20 to 30 minutes, but you're right. When I was really investing time to make sure I was ready for the boss, I'd be 45 minutes in, and then I'd die, and I'm like, oh my god.
That's before getting
to the boss. Before I even got to the boss, because I've just found myself in a particular moment where I've just got those things that have exploded, and the craters are going everywhere, and those big TIE looking things.
Yeah.
Just found myself in a moment where I'm trying to actually upgrade that I've just found myself in a spot, and I've died. And I'm like, wow, that's nearly an hour, and I didn't even attempt to progress to the next level. I was just trying to get as much health as possible, because that brings us back to health. The difficulty thing is the only raft that you could grab on in terms of difficulty was hoping that you got a hell of a lot of health. That was it,
Yeah, I think ultimately the game doesn't do enough to reward your
Hours into it.
perseverance. You know,
And your thoroughness in each room.
Oh, I mean, I would agree with that. I feel like you
Like,
can kind of rush to the boss if you want.
Yeah.
It sounds dumb because obviously you're going to die. But if you're good at the game, you can just do it anyway. But it really does encourage you to clear all the areas, you know, get the pickups and, you know, try to get a bit stronger.
The thing is, how many blue triangle doors would you go into? You're like, this was a waste of time. It's a stupid consumable that maybe like
so the blue triangle
explodes an
doors
enemy
are
or
the
something.
secret doors. Yeah.
Yeah, like it just didn't really feel like it paid off a lot of the time. And, you know, the difficulty back, like, you know, in terms of the items, I think that's entangled in all that. Like, if you made yourself more powerful and you were able to feel more powerful because you spent more time searching throughout these rooms, the difficulty would not be such an issue because people feel like, well, the game's difficult, but I know if I put an hour in, I'm going to feel like it's not that hard. But it felt a lot of the time, extra hours or extra time didn't really pay off as much as it could have, or it would have in other roguelike games. I'm not saying it has to absolutely be like that, but this is marketed and positions itself, I think, as a roguelike. It really has, right? And I think in those regards, there's simple, basic things that make that formula work. And when I play a lot of Dead Cells and I work a lot in terms of leveling up my health and all that stuff, I know that now this game is going to be easier for me because I've spent some time doing the groundwork in that particular run, and that didn't always pay off in terms of difficulty.
Last point on the difficulty leading into the next is that I think the difficulty is very important in terms of the discussion of the actual value proposition of this game. So you're halfway through the game at around 20 hours. I finished the game at 13. How long this game is for you is definitely going to depend on how well you do at it, obviously.
Yeah.
It's not like there's a 15-hour story and it takes 15 hours to get through it. I mean, if you're absolute god tier, you can start this game, not die, and finish it probably in
5 hours.
I reckon 5 to 6 hours. You won't do that, but that's how long that's how the meat and potatoes. That's what the game is. This is a full-priced retail game.
$124 Australian.
124 Australian. You know, 60 or 70 US. Do you feel like there's value there? I
think there is.
I think there's value there.
Yeah.
But, you know,
It's not what
people
I-
need to make an informed decision about how much they're willing to spend for their entertainment. You're like, if you play... There's that bloke... There was an article on a bloke who's played The Witcher 3 for 3,000 hours. I don't know what he's doing. But that's got to be the best $60 that man has ever spent.
Ever.
You know?
Overwatch for us, like, I've got 1,200 hours on my PC and plus another 200... Like there's certain games, right? This is not a game... If the crux of the question is this a game that you're going to get a lot of replayability out of?
Should you buy it, basically?
Well, before that, like, is this a game that I think, because it fits into the rogue genre, that it's going to bring you back for the hours that, you know...
It's a good point. It's lasting appeal.
It doesn't actually have it for me. I feel like, you know, I know what happens in the story. I've looked it up and all that kind of stuff. Like, you know, to be honest, like... It doesn't have the roguelike quality where you can't wait to do your next run because you've understood all these systems. The more I've understood these systems, the more I've realised that this doesn't, at its core, have the same replayability that you've seen from Dead Cells, for instance.
Yeah, it's a good point. The draw card of the genre is that you kind of want to jump in and do more runs and more runs. I finished Hades on my 29th run. I then played to about 60 runs. So the time it took me to finish the game, well, sort of finish it, to putting the game down, I got double the length. It really incentivized me revisiting and, you know, just playing more, essentially.
And you were addicted to that. Like, you took my Switch for that. Cause
I just used his copy.
And, like, that's a perfect example of, like, you know, that had those addictive mechanics that kept you there, where this is failing to really have those.
But, yeah, like, it is an important point because having finished Returnal, I have zero plans to ever boot it up again. And I loved it.
Yeah.
But, like, that's not a shot on the game. Like, I love Journey, but I'm not playing it again. Like, know what happens. Like,
but it's different.
You know,
like, Journey doesn't try to give you mechanics and randomly generated worlds that are trying to fit into a genre that, in its core, brings you back to do the same shit over and over again.
What I'm saying is that I have no problem playing something once.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I played Returnal for 13 hours. It was a great 13 hours. There was like a small portion in the middle, which is a pain in the ass. But the rest of it was like, I loved this game. But, you know, when it's advertised as within this genre, if it's advertised as that, then it's important to sort of discuss its lasting appeal. And yeah, I have basically zero plans of ever revisiting. There are some daily challenges. There's these, you know, cipher glyphs, which is think like
like,
I don't know. You can read these tablets that are in a foreign language.
The language of the aliens.
A few completionist things, but like I'm not coming back.
But back to the $60 question. Let's just say you want to finish it once, which you have. Do you think this is worth $124 Australian, really, and what, $79 US?
I mean, value is what you're willing to pay for something.
No, I know that.
And
but
so
like
what I'm saying is that would I pay like? Yeah, I think it's good value. I think there's good value there.
I think there's certain yardsticks, if I can just jump in. Some people will really feel like they've got their money's worth because it's pushing graphics forward. Some people will feel like they've really got their money's worth because it was a fantastic 20 or 30 hour experience. It was really grueling, and yes, they don't want to pick it up again, and they might just want to not have to think about that, yes, this is actually a rogue-like game, and it should hook them back more, but they finished the game and they've had fun for 20 or 30 hours. And then there's some people that will feel like, oh, I've loved roguelikes for so long, I thought that this was going to be my next 300-hour game, and they're not getting that.
Absolutely not.
You're just not going to, from my experience and your experience, if you're thinking that, you may be disappointed. I came into this thinking, I love Dead Cells. Ooh, a really beautiful AAA, from my knowledge, first entry of a roguelike into like the PS5 graphical fidelity 4K space. This is going to be really cool. This may be the game I always just chill with. It's not that. It's what you play for 20 or 30 hours, and then I think you're done with it personally. So It depends on what you want, but I would not purchase this game for the price it is now, knowing what I know. I would actually wait for it to be on sale. Personally. Doesn't mean I didn't like it. It's just not what I would usually want from these types of games.
Yeah, and it's important to say that it sounds like we hate this game.
I'm not saying I hate it. I'm just saying...
And I just want to clarify, I loved this game. But the replay...
You walked in for a certain thing.
The replayability is an important point, and it's not there. I don't think... It might be for you. In terms of the replayability, the 13 hours that are there, loved it. I think there's value there, but, you know... It's different strokes for different folks.
There we go.
All right. Returnal, it's out. It's amazing. It looks cool.
It's out. It's amazing. We also say it's
buy now. Buy it now. No, but that's just I think at least my experience with the game.
Honestly
do you think you'll finish it?
I was excited when
Are you drawn to finish it?
When I woke up today before I knew we were doing our episode, regardless, because I already knew I had interacted with 90% of the artifacts, 90% of the parasites. I understood all the systems. I understood I still got up and was like, I don't need to play this game for the review now, but I want to. And I jumped on for another hour, and then I got really pissed because you could see that I was dying. It's
amazing. So I don't know why they do it, but the PlayStation 5 app or the PS app sends me a notification every time Sam dies.
And you're like...
Every time he dies, it says, your friend, blah, 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 was last seen in, X zone, as in saying he died. So I'll just get this notification on my phone, and I'll immediately message him, basically, in a way saying, suck shit.
Yeah, and I'm like, fuck this. But I had a good time, even though I was frustrated as hell. But I think that's in a nutshell. You're just going to get frustrated as well as respect this game. And at the same time, think maybe this hasn't fully delivered. But that's where we'll leave it today. ThiccBoi is going to do more reviews in the future. I think the next one we'll probably do is Rifts Apart. Clank.
Yes.
That comes out in June, so that'll be fun.
That's next month.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah, true.
Hell yeah. All right, well, guys.
Another Sony game.
Buy Sony right now.
Another great PlayStation 5 game to look forward to.
You know what? I love PlayStation.
And we'll be returnaling to our consoles in no time.
Terrible. All right, we're going to leave with that terrible dad joke, guys. Thanks so much. See you guys next time. Laymen out.
Take care.